the phrase cyber attack is generally a phrase designed specifically to create that frisson of fear that you and a lot of people hear. And I don't think it's a very helpful description at all, because, as you say, they can go from sort of what I consider to be low-level vandalism all the way up to activities which can cover almost a state of war and everything that sits in between. So I think in that sense it's not helpful, and therefore it's important, I think, for everybody to understand what different types mean.
And it's probably too early to answer the question of what the type that we've seen this morning with regard to the Labour Party categorically or definitively means. But how plausible is talk, and I have heard and read a lot of sort of state-sanctioned cyber attacks. And we have no choice but to continue using the word until one of us comes up with a better one.
No, indeed. Malicious online activity, I think is normally a good one. And I think, yes, of course, there is state-sponsored attack, just as there is any other type. I think looking at the description of what's been made available this morning is that it's what's called a distributed denial of service attack, which is simply aimed at disabling the functionality of either websites or systems by flooding them with so much traffic that it ceases to operate. In layman's terms, just imagine trying to get 1,000 people through a single door at the same time, and translate that upwards. And it's simply intended to disable capability. Now, I've heard the phrase sophisticated being used in the media. This is not a sophisticated attack. Just about anybody with any basic understanding of how the internet works can do it. And in fact, even if you wanted to do it but didn't know how to, you can pay somebody to do it.
Yes.
So in and of itself, it's not a sophisticated attack. In terms of how it was dealt with, the Labour Party have quite plainly got some kind of protection in place which does what's called load balancing, which tends to move the data around so it doesn't have an effect but may slow systems down a little bit, and that's what appears to have happened. So at one level, I don't see this as being a sophisticated attack and could have actually been done by anybody.
And, well, in many ways, I suppose that knocks the stuffing out of my next question, which is what would the attackers hope to gain then, ordinarily, whether it's sophisticated or not? Actually, no, I'm restuffing my question. I'm still interested in your answer.
No. and it's still a good question. So what kind of people do this? So first of all, there are people who just don't like another entity and therefore decide they want to mess up how they operate. Sometimes criminals will do it in a kind of, if you pay a certain amount of money, we'll stop doing it. But the other interesting point, which I think is why it's still a good question, is some organisations, including more sophisticated actors, will use a basic denial of service attack as a masquerade for other slightly more sinister motives. So quite often they will tie up resources in one area while they perhaps take data out or carry out other activity. And I think when the Labour Party say we are satisfied that no data has been breached, I think they probably need to do enough investigation to make sure this denial of service wasn't in fact simply a diversionary tactic for other things. But at this point, it's very difficult to know. It could be any number of malicious cyber attackers, and it's a very, very, very common thing. About 500,000 attacks like this happen every day.
Good grief. All of which perhaps, and I know, I don't think that I was planning to ask you this in advance, so please don't feel compelled to answer it, but all of which makes the contents of this mysterious Russian report that the Select Committee on Intelligence and Security have put together, but which we're not currently allowed to see, all the more appetising, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's quite interesting that, of course, inevitably the two issues have been conflated within the same story. Of course, you know, the issue about whether or not this report about Russian interference in UK elections has been published at the same time as a fairly low-level, unsophisticated attack on one of the political parties doesn't necessarily make them the same story. That said, it doesn't necessarily mean it isn't. So, you know, I think it still, as you say, it still makes this issue about foreign interference in elections quite a salacious one.
Indeed it does. Brian Lord, that was exactly what we were hoping for. Thank you so much for your expertise and your, with me cast as the idiot, your idiot's guide to what we will still have to call cyber attacks or malicious online activity.